if you don't respect it, if you don't understand the audience, if you don't, respect the IP, if you mischaracterize it, it will fail.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Kids Media Club podcast. I'm Andy Williams.
I'm Emily Horgan, and Joe, we've got a guest here to riff with us. Can you do the intros?
I certainly can. He was a late sub, for which we are super grateful, but friend of the show. So we're delighted to have back Simon Pulman. And I'm going to ask him to open with his provocation that he said just before we started recording, because I think it's a great one. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you for having me. And, I do apologize a little bit for being dressed down. I will be putting on a tuxedo in about an hour's time, and I thought that might have been overdressed. But thank you very much for having me on. And obviously the context for this is what everybody's talking about, which is the Minecraft movie and its quite seismic success over the weekend. The latest estimate I saw was $301 million worldwide for opening weekend. And there's a lot of context and a lot of things to discuss. But one of them is that this is not a film that was terribly liked by critics. I think it's about 42% on Rotten Tomatoes. Very similar with Super Mario Brothers. The critics didn't love that, and it ended up making 1.3 billion global. And so what I had said to the group was, which I believe is that critics are increasingly irrelevant when it comes to the success of any sort of entertainment product outside of possibly awards bait prestige type things.
Totally. They're in a bubble, right? It appears, and they're kind of stuck in this bubble, but not least because they don't understand gaming IP-based movies. Why do you think that is? I look. It's certainly true that it's still in Hollywood that there is a hierarchy of entertainment. So you have up here, you can't see. If you're listening, you won't be able to see, but I'm reaching my hand quite far up, which is motion pictures at the top. Television, some way below that, although maybe it's a little bit higher now because we have some movie stars in TV on streaming now, and then everything else way below. And I think gaming is probably towards the bottom in the perception of people. And for a critic, they think about movies in a certain way in terms of performance and story structure and discrete story, and by the same token, I think quite pejoratively of gaming. So you often see, even for a movie that's not video game related, like a critique from a critic would be, it's shot like a video game. It looks like a video game. Whereas if I read that, I'm like, great, where do I sign up? I want to see it. But, this is the thing. Something like Minecraft, it's quite astounding what we've seen from some of these clips in theaters over the last, 72 hours. This is a communal event, and part of it is that the audience is seeing back, reflected, what they want to see in terms of the game experience, these sort of lines and memes and everything else. And it's no surprise. If you are a critic without any of that context, how do you decipher this? It's like a foreign language, I suppose. And I think that's it. Context is so important in all entertainment now, and if you just don't have context, you can't appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think that your point about being seen, I feel like that is a huge part of the success of this movie. It's a community that feels like they're not validated by movies in the same way, and they feel seen and heard in a way by this movie. So I think that's a big part of it.
Have young people ever given 2 cents what critics say? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think back to the teen movies coming out in the 90s, noughties, like I'm sure didn't, you know what I mean? Like American Pie.
Well, I'm sure you would find, reviews of Elvis or the Beatles saying, "What's this racket?"
Yeah. I think I heard that one.
But I think increasingly so. And I don't know. Like you have to look at the data to see what the correlation is between reviews and sort of box office. But I do think it's an all-time low. I also think that probably in the same with video games, we've seen a number of really quite well-reviewed games, coming from big publishers this past year that nonetheless have just failed to resonate and find an audience. And obviously, what matters: community. Creators / influencers, people who, affinity groups, people who share passion and can kind of say and walk away and say, I'm like you, I like the same things as you, and I love this, therefore you will love it.
Yeah.
Why did Minecraft cut through then? I mean, do you think it was they gave Jared Hess free reign and he kind of dived into it? That point that you made about the meme side of it, I think is really important, because you could tell that it was made by someone, and it may be Jared Hess, or it may have been throughout the whole crew, that had a fondness for Minecraft. You know, there was the Steve moment, there were the creepers, there was a really touching part where Technoblade's character, the pig with the crown, walked across the screen and they called him out as Legend, who was one of the biggest Minecraft YouTubers who unfortunately died of cancer. So those things that actually speak to that audience that would have gone over the critics, the adults' head.
And let's not forget that, you know, even 2 or 3 weeks ago, the trades were projecting that this would open at 55 million domestic.
Wow, that's interesting.
You know, and it opened at, you know, obviously considerably, you know, more than double that. Look, I think based on the size of the IP alone, you know, the floor was quite high. I always thought that this was going to do quite well, but I think you're absolutely spot on insofar as really, because this is the thing. In thinking about in preparation for this podcast, clearly IP is incredibly powerful, but I don't want to take away credit from the filmmaking team and the studio, because they clearly did an incredible job. They did an incredible job of really understanding that audience. They must have done their research in building those moments into it. You know, the crowd goes wild type moments, and then they marketed it really well as well. And I think that there's also it's just interesting that it all seemed to swell at the right time. You know, when I initially saw the trailer, I felt pretty bullish that it was going to make $1 billion worldwide, but you know, that was not necessarily, you know, across the board people's sort of feelings 3 weeks ago. But you know, the funny thing is, my building in New York, where my firm is, there's a big wraparound, you know, display, you know, billboard that goes right around the building, and they put that up about 3 weeks ago. And really, I think that they focused that marketing campaign, so it really started about 3 weeks ago and sort of built up. And I'm sure they went multi-channel. I wasn't paying too much attention to what they did in terms of within Minecraft itself or with, you know, YouTube streamers, but I'm sure they targeted both through traditional media and in sort of, you know, through social and other channels as well.
Yeah, but that's interesting on the marketing side, because I'm sure they did do that and did a fantastic job on that. But what really struck me is that when you compare it to something like Barbie, it felt like the marketing was kind of a lot more restrained. They didn't spend anywhere near as much of the marketing budget that Barbie spent, and yet they've ended up having a weekend that's kind of comparable in terms of the box office for the weekend. So it feels like people are still underestimating how big its opening weekend has been.
The astounding thing to me, though, Andy, is that on Friday it was positioned to open lower than Barbie and Super Mario Brothers, and it grew over the course of the weekend. So that says that there's a huge word of mouth piece, and maybe even there's only, all right, this is going to age me, it's going to date me here and slightly embarrassing, but there's only one. You know, I was a teenager when The Matrix came out, and I saw it on the Friday night that it came out, and I was blown away by sort of, you know, by the ending and everything else. And I went the next day to see it again. I wonder if there were some situations there where people were like, "Oh my gosh, we've got to go again."
Yeah, I feel like that's probably the string to pull on this one. Like, if you're looking at the comparison to Barbie, I feel like Barbie went 4-quadrant. Like, Barbie tried to be as broad as possible, pull in maybe demos and audiences that people might not have expected for that movie, and hit all of them. Whereas Minecraft is a little bit more in a niche demo-wise. Like, I don't see people taking their grandmothers to it. Like, I don't see, you know, like, multi-generational parents will go along to it, but, you know, I just think it's a little bit different to Barbie, but the passion for it, I think, will give it the legs in the long term. You know what I mean? The passion of the fandom that are going there and like repeat visits, etc., going with this group of mates, going with that group of mates. Yeah, that's where I see the long tail of this coming from.
Yeah, and the one thing I do think that Warner Brothers have repeated from the Barbie playbook is the brand partnership side of things, because Barbie was replete with loads of brand partnerships. And there are a ton of them for Minecraft too. And I do think that helps the kind of the word of mouth thing amongst that younger demographic. They're collecting things. There was a family in front of us at the concession stand when we went to the cinema to see it on Friday. And they turned around and apologized and offered to buy us food because they were buying everything. All the merch, the meal deals where they got one of each cup. It took them forever. But actually, it was really nice to see. This was a genuine moment for them.
Yeah,
like Black Friday for exhibitors, you know, like this movie has probably put them back into the black for the year. And look, that's what you want to see. And you know, look, it's an incredible. You seldom have this experience at movies when people are sort of, you know, not visibly but audibly reacting to things on the screen, and it seems to have done it, and it must have piqued the curiosity of a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily have had it on their radar. It's pretty stunning, to be honest.
Do you think that there is you were talking about the cross-generational appeal of something like Barbie, and that this didn't apply to that? I can't think of a movie that's been this big a hit that feels like it's very much a young generation movie. That I saw the Sarah Davies, the one of the Dragon's Den entrepreneurs, she kind of posted on Instagram that she'd been to take her son to see it, and her post was, well, that's 2 hours of my life that I'm never going to get back. And it felt like that really signposted the fact that this is a movie that, yes, maybe kind of parents and kids go together, but it feels like it leans far more into delivering for that kid audience.
Yeah, compared to something like Mario, where Mario would have much more of a broader kind of multi-generational appeal, I would say.
But isn't it lovely to have a movie that genuinely feels to kids like it's theirs?
Amazing.
Imagine that.
Amazing.
It's not like the grown-ups trying to make a kids movie that ends up like serving avocado on toast at a kids party. It's genuinely there. It's what
Absolutely.
they wanted.
That's an acronym. You went there, Redfern. You went there on an acronym. I totally agree, though, and I know we were spitballing on our WhatsApp chat during the week, and I was saying Scott Mendelson summed this up in a really succinct way of like, imagine that it's actually a movie made for kids. It's not just a rehash of a franchise that their parents are into. And it worked, you know. Yeah. Surprise, 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 surprise.
And in stark, I mean, you couldn't have really a more stark contrast than Minecraft and Snow White.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I was thinking that too.
This was your grandmother's, you know, property that we're going to somehow try to find a way for you to like. Versus, no, actually, this is something that's native and is relevant. And I think for the parents, I'm sure a lot of parents didn't get it, but also they get to appreciate their kids enjoying something and bond over it a little bit, which is very cool. And I just have to think that the sequel is a fait accompli at this point in time. Absolutely, you know.
Definitely, yeah.
Do you think that I feel like one of the other difference with Mario Brothers or any other gaming IP is that you have kind of identifiable characters from those IPs that make it very easy to translate into a movie. It feels like Minecraft, it feels like it's a celebration of the players and the community in a way that other gaming IP hasn't been really. Other gaming IP has tended to focus on the characters within that world, but this one feels like it's a celebration of the community as a whole.
Andy, how long you got? Because we can explore this.
We can do this as one of those 3-hour podcasts where we.
This is key because gaming IP and gaming audiences and gaming adaptations are not homogenous, right? Mm-hmm. So you have something like The Last of Us, which is a pretty sort of linear story that's being mostly retold, slightly embellished. You have something like Fallout, that's a world that's sort of being Super Mario Brothers, you have these consistent characters and at this point fairly consistent designs for them and sort of characteristics, but remixing the story, and the movie was sort of a remix of that. Yeah. And Minecraft, sure, like no real narrative. And I'm on record. I don't love this sort of in general as a human being is sucked into this video game world. I think it tends to be a sort of a lazy type of a structure.
but it was perfect here, and very, it seems pretty clear they were looking at Jumanji, the most recent Jumanji movie as a comp.
Yeah.
Obviously got Jack Black as well, and it worked, and the possibilities are almost limitless within that world.
Which is the point of Minecraft, it being sandbox, isn't it? Every user experience in Minecraft is individual because you're making your own stories there. And that was what struck me as someone who was trying to sit and enjoy it with the rest of the families in the cinema, but of course it starts analysing. But in a way, the story was kept deliberately. We've got to get the orb back. You've got the Nether. You've got the overworld, and then you've got the comedy character on which it all kind of hangs. It wasn't too complex, and it was actually. It was more to allow the whole Minecraft world to kind of reach out into the audience and envelop them, and that's where the memes came in. The story arguably didn't need to be too taxing.
So I'm gonna. We didn't discuss doing this, but I'm gonna put you guys on the spot just because I'm intrigued by this. All right. So some creature from the Netherworld, or perhaps an alien, or perhaps a Secret Service agent comes to your house and says, "You have to pick an IP to make $1 billion, or else." Okay. You have to create this kind of experience and theatrical reaction and make $1 billion. What would you pick?
Oh,
you know what I'm going to say. I'd go to Roblox and bring something out of Roblox.
But a specific IP or the Roblox?
Oh no,
right?
Probably a specific IP. But I'm trying to think of one that I think would work in the same way that Minecraft has, which has got enough kind of flex to bring in the audience, but is meme worthy.
Want me to go while you think of it?
You're so putting us on the spot here. Yeah,
look, this is cheating a little bit, but I do think, in time, the Super Smash Brothers movie that will probably inevitably happen will make a huge amount of money. I think possibly Fortnite, it has that same, meme worthiness of the different dances and everything else, plus with a partnership with Disney, maybe, or whoever you bring in sort of the characters there. But beyond that, it's really, really tricky, and that's the thing. Everyone in town. And I said to you guys before we recorded, I believe that every single person in Hollywood will be calling around frantically over the last 48 hours. What game IP do you have? What video games can we do? What can we move forward? You've got to get out and pitch this. But as I said, video games are different. Adaptations are different, and this took a long time in gestation. But it's also quite a particular IP. I agree. Like Roblox seems to be the comp in terms of, I think it was an animated series, but Among Us maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe.
You've got.
I have one in mind, but I'm not going to say it because it's actually something that
because I have it optioned.
Yeah, I'm going to option instead. But it reminds me.
So where do investors apply, Andy, if they want to put some money into this one?
Yes. It reminds me, I saw somebody that was a trader on TV, and he was saying how people get rich is that they make a bet where they're right and everyone else is wrong. And I feel like Minecraft is sort of an example of that, is that disparaged for many years. I mean, if you'd have gone back 10 years and said this was going to be $1 billion movie IP, everyone would have laughed you out of the room. And so it's kind of that's where I think Hollywood's probably going to go wrong, is that they're all going to shift to games en masse.
And they won't execute. Well, it's funny. Well, go on, Emily.
But this gets me so annoyed. Where it's like, Hollywood learns the wrong lesson, right? And case in point, Snow White, right? Okay, so Disney live action reboots, and I was ranting about this last week, and I know I annihilated Snow White, but okay, Cinderella, we're going to do it. It's additive to the narrative. It kind of reframes the story of that movie in a different way. Lily Collins is beautiful, and it's a great success. Therefore, the learning is, okay, live action reboots work. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, no, that live action reboot worked because of what it did and the nuance of what it did. Yeah. And I would argue none of the rest have been the same. I'm not finished, Joe. There's another one then, and it's Barbie and game IP, right? And then suddenly everyone's like, oh yeah, well, if you make a if you reboot, if you like do a movie version of a toy IP, it's totally going to work. Everyone forgets that Battleship with Rihanna was an absolute flop. Do you know what I mean? Right? Like, and then it's like this, it's oversimplistic. It's like, oh, gaming IP work. Let's just take gaming IP and that's definitely going to work. It's like, no, this movie worked because it was the right mix of loads of different things.
To hear, to see how the Monopoly movie does.
Oh,
and those
the Uno movie, lads.
As they get revived. But look, I agree 100% around the live action, and I think remakes, and I think that there's diminishing returns there. It's actually a big problem. But to Andy's point, there are two ways you can really characterize it. On the one hand, I agree. Like, they made a bet in this. It took years to develop, almost timed it to the market, right? Because the value of that IP and that brand and that world has only grown, and the audience. The other way to look at it is, and this is what concerns me a little bit, is that Hollywood has to rent IPs from other industries, because
and communities.
There's very little original. And communities, exactly. And communities.
That's Andy. Yeah. They've learned the art of building community, listening to them, and evolving their games, fixing bugs, showing up for them. Yet Hollywood comes across as someone who isn't really interested in engaging the audience in a conversation. No, you sit and watch the movie. You receive what we've created for you, and you thank us and pay us for it. And I think that's the difference. And to your point, Emily, it was like, you can just feel that rush towards gaming IP. Let's option whatever we can because we've found a formula. Hollywood likes surety, always up to the right. And they'll be.
But I just want to say, I want to be crystal clear about this. As you know, I'm incredibly bullish on gaming IP. I think it has the richest worlds, the richest stories, but you have to understand and respect it. So for me, it's not just the pursuit of gaming IP. It's the pursuit of gaming IP because you're going down a list, and that's the. It's like, post Twilight, we've got to get YA. We've got to get more YA, and we had a few years of that. If you don't respect it, if you don't understand the audience, if you don't respect the IP, if you mischaracterize it, it will fail. It will fail, and in fact, it will then blow back onto the brand as well. So I think both producers and IP owners need to be a little bit careful around this. And I think we're going to see some amazing stuff. We're also going to see some absolutely atrocious
some absolute trash. And
there's going to be loads of people that just. I mean, I think you're going to have a spate of gaming and toy franchise movies where they'll say, "Let's get an indie director in to kind of put a bit of a spin on it." So you'll just follow the formula that they followed with Minecraft. That in some ways is borrowed a bit from Barbie. Is you get a slightly left-wheel director to bring their vision to the piece. But I get the feeling that if that just becomes a formula that's just rolled out movie after movie, it's going to look very tired.
I think there's that snobbishness in Hollywood that gaming is somehow lowbrow. They've got to kind of ditch that and go and reach into gaming. Find the writers and directors that are working there. There are writers and directors in gaming. And bring them along rather than thinking that, it's a closed shop, isn't it? And I will give it to this director. They'll do a great job on it. And it's to your point, Simon, I think that word respect is really, really important. You have to respect the gaming IP and the community that loves it, because you don't want to draw their wrath.
But that goes across everything, Joe. We've spoken about this before as well. It's like, just because you can make a movie doesn't mean you can make a TikTok. Just because you make a movie doesn't mean you can make... you need to respect all the other crafts out there. Have people who've been doing them for as long as you have and are as in depth in all of the different levers and ways through as filmmakers are. So that respect and that kind of checking the ego at the door is key in terms of actually delivering something that's faithful to the IP and has the special sauce.
Yeah.
So where do we think this leaves Lilo and Stitch in the summer as a live action remake? Do you think that's going to inspire? I mean, obviously, Lilo and Stitch has had a lot of success with Toy recently, bit of a resurgence on some socials. Do we think that Stitch is going to recreate that cultural moment in the way Minecraft has?
I think it has potential, right? I think it has potential because you need to look at the reason the movie's being made, right? Is this being made because it's additive? It's back to that kind of Cinderella thing. Is it doing something different? And I think Lilo and Stitch has been a sleeper IP for many, many years, and I think there is commercial and creative reason to be taking it to somewhere new, and nothing has really been done on it in like decades. So I think I remain hopeful on Lilo and Stitch, I have to say.
I understand it's a very, very popular character, and like the thing is, presumably they have now, right? Snow White would have been greenlit 5 years ago, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
They've got a lot more data now from Disney Plus, so perhaps it's data driven a little bit. I think it's going to do actually very well, which obviously then we'll get a load of reactionary think pieces saying live action remakes aren't dead. We should do them.
Emily Horgan was wrong.
People seem to respond very well to the Super Bowl spot they did. That was sort of almost like AR, where they showed the creature. Stitch is the creature, right? Running around on the on the field, and perhaps they'll do other similar types of integrations coming up. And look, this is the interesting thing. Nothing to do with games, but clearly, I have to imagine with the Disney partnership, they're going to roll something out in Fortnite. They're going to possibly look to do things in other gaming, because that's how you reach that audience now, in part.
But I think you're right on the data front. I think they're looking at demand there, and you and I were talking before the end of last year in depth about Moana a number of times, and again, Moana 2 was a great example of the observation of demand and that how that access to first party data and direct relationship with their consumer give Disney an insight on what is actually wanted. Now, whether Snow White was greenlit before or after that is a different question, but there has to be some markers there that are telling them that this is something that's worth pursuing.
Yeah, I think part of the reason with Snow White is my understanding of it is that it had quite a tortured production and went through quite a lot of reshoots. And I think that if you go in with an attitude that this is the story or the version of Snow White you want to tell, and then basically you get pressure from the studio to completely rethink and rewrite the whole thing, it can go off the rails very quickly because no one has ownership over it at that point.
Snow White was developed into a world that doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly.
That's the reality. It was developed into the bubble of 2019, 2020, and a lot of the changes. And COVID costs. We've lost Joe. COVID costs, obviously drove up the budget. Those reshoots, and then they had some disastrous PR. But this my position really around this a little bit is okay. So Lilo and Stitch is a pretty new property. If you have to change something drastically in any way, including for quote unquote sensitivity reasons, don't remake it. Don't do it. Just leave it be. Make something else, or ideally, God willing, tell a new story. That's the story you actually want to tell. If that's the story that you want to tell and the message you want to tell with don't use Snow White. Obviously, you're using that for branding and for name recognition reasons. Don't do it. Come up with something original. And guess what? Now you've got some new IP potentially that may have some forward-looking value.
Absolutely.
But look, they'll have learned their lessons just in the same way that you can see Marvel learned their lesson from some of the missteps that they had over the last 3 or 4 years.
I was interested to see on Lilo and Stitch that Dan Lin is producing. So Dan Lin, who is now obviously just jumped from that project straight into film head at Netflix, Lego movie producer, of multiple Lego movies. I was like, what? How does that work?
Yeah, interesting. One of the things that struck me with Lilo and Stitch is where the Toy Fair in London this year, you wandering around and talking to some of the stall owners, and I was asking what are the toys that are selling most, you're most excited about. A lot of them said Lilo and Stitch or Stitch, and so you got that sense that the live action version of Lilo and Stitch could almost be like a toy spin-off. That for a lot of people they kind of related and understood the toy almost before the movie in some respects.
Yeah, I imagine there'll be a lot of aisle space in Targets, for example. This coming, which obviously that helps us as well. It's going to be. Look, it has to work. They need a win. They need a win coming off of Snow White.
Yeah.
So I expect they'll push it. They'll push it very hard, and I think it's possibly less cast contingent because the star really is sort of the creature. So
I think it will do well. I think I've got high hopes for Pixar's Elio as well. I think that will. I think that could do very well, and it looks like they're giving it a proper marketing push this time, which previously they've sort of buried the movie releases for Pixar films coming out.
I've got my IP from Roblox that I'm going to option.
You're sitting there stewing.
I'm going to go Dress to Impress, which has had billions of lifetime visits. Every time I look, it's got about 250,000 concurrents in the game. So it's got a really repeatable game loop that gives you that elasticity to tell some interesting stories. Kind of fashion-based, girl skew. I think you could have a lot of fun with that one in the Minecraft thing.
And that's the thing that I feel like Roblox is almost a shadow economy, a shadow world. If you look at the Steam concurrents, right now Monster Hunter's hitting 300,000-400,000, which has been a huge success. But there are always a handful of games, Roblox, 200 to 500,000 people playing at the same time.
Yeah.
And for those not listening who maybe aren't familiar with games, that's absolutely colossal. That's people simultaneously, and they're in the same world at the same time.
Yeah.
It's a social piece. There's usually a very deep connection with the Roblox creator, who often is going into the Discord and chatting with them. So I think you may be right. I mean, I don't know that IP, but I'll tell you what you've just said there, Joe, in terms of you describing it. Mattel's going to kill me for saying this. I think that I would back that before I back like a Polly Pocket. Adaptation, just in terms of relevance to the audience. And I don't know how much sort of baked-in story potential there is, but...
Yeah, I think that thinking... I was on TikTok the other day, and there was a women's NBA team in the US, and their TikTok was their players on the court walking and doing the Dress to Impress poses.
Really?
Yeah, so when it crosses over, that's when I think that you've got something.
And Dress to Impress has been humongous on Roblox for 2 years now?
Yeah, exactly. So, and again, it was set up and started by two, I think, 18-year-old girls. And yeah, at any one time.
It's absolutely incredible, honestly. And look, this is another of my sort of theories, which is, in the 1960s, 1970s, if you were a young creative person, right, maybe you became a musician or you aspired to be a film director. Now, if you are a young creative person, it's Roblox. It's Roblox and platforms like that where you can go direct. And I think it requires different skills, because I do think the audience communication piece is a layer on top. I don't know if it's possible. It's not like being an auteur in Nouvelle Vague, cinema in the 1960s, where you put this out into the world. I'm Jean-Luc Godard. I'm a genius, right? It's put this out in the world. What do they like? Iterate, talk to them, ask questions. And so that's very, very hands-on. But then what happens is, let's just think it from the audience perspective, let's imagine kids are starting on Roblox 11, 12 years of age. That's their expectation. That's their expectation. And then if it's not there, they don't understand.
Yeah, they have to be, creators have to be their own auteur and PR department.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? They're auteur, PR department, editors, producers, analysts,
business development.
Yeah,
the whole shebang.
Yeah, but that allows them to iterate swiftly in a way that the studios could never hope to replicate.
Yeah, but again, rent the audience. Let the gaming company let the gaming company develop it over time, and then pay them money, and that's going to change the dynamic, because. From my perspective, at least, it's not like going to an author in the 1980s. Here you go. Here's your option fee. Here's your purchase price. You can keep publishing your book. We'll take everything else. No, no. I mean, okay, I'll let you do a movie. You've got to pay me handsomely, but I'm keeping everything else, including my audience, if they're represented, I should say. But I think that audience piece is just increasingly important. Cultivation of community.
Yeah.
Do you think you will get to a point where some of the owners of the gaming IP will decide that they'd quite like a shot at making the movie as well?
Ooh, this is one of my favorite topics, Andy. No, seriously, this is one of my favorite topics, because the answer is yes. Now, there are barriers to this, right? Making a movie in a traditional way
It's very, very complex. Games companies have tried it, and it hasn't really worked out for them. When it has worked out, with something like Riot, it's been extraordinarily expensive. But yes, this is clearly the future. You've got a company that's generating cash, especially possibly with a technology like AI that can bring down your cost, or alternatively, use in-game assets. In-game assets. Because this is the thing. Audience doesn't care about visual fidelity in games. Yep. Maybe they don't care. Maybe you just take your thing from Dress to Impress, is that what it's called? Yep. Dress to Impress, and then take those characters, maybe up-res them slightly and put some voices on them, and boom, go, put it out there, movie.
It's already happening. I mean, there are a lot of games in Roblox. I mean, the Roblox studio is a de facto animation piece of animation software, and there's already hundreds of thousands of hours of content being uploaded to YouTube of users going into Roblox experiences and actually acting out their own little vignettes. So that's kind of happening from a user level. I have wondered myself how long it will be before Roblox Studios is spun up, in a similar way to how Inox Tag, the French YouTuber, made his own video of him climbing Everest, and it ended up in French theaters.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because I have been asked this question. Do you think that Roblox is going to create an entertainment arm? And my answer at the time was no, because that's not their model, right? Like, inserting themselves in that process, their model is to monetize on sort of these incremental fees on and to build up scale and so on. But maybe that will change, because they'll have an interest in curating the brand, in helping creators and so on. I don't know. I mean, if you look at YouTube, obviously it had multiple attempts at trying to actually create content, and just decided, actually, no, this isn't our business. But you just never know what's on the horizon. I just think that look, I mean, it's a good job you guys have a podcast talking about this on a weekly basis, because nobody knows anything, and we're living in complete chaos, which creates headaches and opportunity.
Well, I had one other question. What would be your advice to Hollywood in terms of, we've talked about in some ways the appeal of video games as a source of IP. What's the prospect for Hollywood what's the best shot for Hollywood to be able to generate their own IP alongside that? Or do you think they're now in a position where they're going to have to just kind of buy out audiences and IP from gaming? Where can Hollywood kind of internally create its own big monster?
I mean, look, they've made a rod for their own back. It's very, very easy to come on here and sort of prognosticate, you should do this, and people do it all the time. But it's hard, because the thing about the remakes and these and the franchises and the sequels is it's about quarterly reporting to Wall Street, right? It's foreseeable, model out, okay, best case, worst case, and you have this sort of predictability. Clearly, the easy answer is that Hollywood should be making original movies. And, one thing I've sort of, proudly announced, that if I ran a studio, it would be 80% original. 80% original, 20%, franchise, or some kind of ratio like that. There would be some allocation, maybe the other way around, but some allocation towards original ideas every year. But you have to bake in the ceiling is going to be lower. If you make a movie for 20, 30 million, chances are you will not make $1 billion. But if you didn't make movies for 15, 20 million dollars, you wouldn't have John Wick, right? Or and those kinds of things. And so I think that's the easy answer to what it ideally would do. It's very, very hard to do in practice, because the thing about it is, and I was talking about this on another podcast recently. It's very easy to think of Hollywood in terms of a block, right? It's a corporation, it's a town, it's an industry. But actually, you have to look at it on an individual level, right? Individual incentives and individual fears, because this is what drives everything. And ultimately, this is the thing. If you're an executive, your job, your personal job, your personal livelihood is linked to this. If you greenlight a failure and you've owned that, and that's your pet project, you might lose, your job. When you go with something that's, Shrek 5, Toy Story 5, and if it underperforms, you can't blame me. Look at what the previous movies made versus something that you have just picked out yourself. And it's a shame because I do believe in talent, and I think that goes in directors and writers, but it's also executives. I mean, we worked for many years with the company's sister that at the time was run by Stacey Snider. And Stacey Snider, outside her office, had leather-bound scripts of every movie that she ever greenlit. Forrest Gump, these kinds of things. And it's amazing to look at it. But you can't tell me that Stacey Snider doesn't have taste and doesn't have talent to be able to pick those winners. But that requires putting yourself out there and sort of taking some risks. So part of the answer is returning to that. If they can't do that, stop dismissing games. Stop. You have to play games. You have to understand games. You have to promote people. You have to be less grabby in trying to take rights from games. And by the way, not only games, I would say manga, anime, webtoons as well, because that's the other big source of IP. You could go onto webtoons right now and I think pick out, 50 incredible IPs across genres and sort of develop those up. But no, nobody's doing that because it's almost, again, like a foreign world to the sort of the Hollywood institution system.
Yeah. And I do sometimes think, which is ironic as somebody who deals quite a lot in data, like there's nearly like a data stranglehold, that like the data stranglehold intersection, the requirements for Wall Street reporting mean that you're not allowed to have having a failure. Like there used to be lots of flops in TV, right? Like, and you need to bet broad to get return, bet on 100 to get one, one Earth shot kind of thing. And that really just can't happen anymore. And it's not just Hollywood, by the way, lads. Like that, this is precisely the same issue that we're seeing in kids media, where it's like commissioners want established IP, commissioners want established IP. They want to rent the audience, Which
is why Netflix is looking at YouTube for kids creators instead of creators.
Exactly. And it's why, we look at the last. If you consider the period of, if we're talking preschool programming, like 2010 to 2015, where it was like Octonauts, Doc McStuffins, Paw Patrol, probably about 6 household names that still remain. And we look at the last, 6 years, it's only a handful, so it's, it's everywhere in traditional media industry, I would say.
Bring back creativity, willing to take some courageous bets.
Make creativity great again.
Yes. Which is one of the key messages in Minecraft, isn't it? It's about celebrating creativity. That's one of the big themes.
Good way to bring it back to the starting point, Joe.
It's almost as if we planned this stuff. Well, thank you so much for bailing us out today in terms of a guest, but thank you very much for giving us lots of food for thought, Simon. It's always a joy to have you on.
Always so much fun to have you on, Simon.
Such a pleasure, truly, and very, very excited for the listeners because I'm going to be seeing Joe and Andy in person tomorrow.
Absolutely.
We're on the same time zone, which is very, very rare. I'm sorry, Emily.
My FOMO is real.
I've seen Joe and I have traipsed around San Francisco together, so we've met in person. But Andy, I've never met, so I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too.
Pixar didn't happen.
Yeah.
Okay. You're on.
Cool.
Give us a sign off, Andy.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, Simon. And thank you to you guys for listening. Please like and subscribe, and we will see you next week.